Hey, what is up guys? It's your boy Speed here, and today we are going to be looking at BZM's Puck. This was the semifinals of ESL1 Stockholm, and the reason why I want to watch this Puck here today is he had 3 kills and 100 CS at minute 11. How often do you have 100 CS at minute 11? How often do you have 100 CS at minute 20? That should be the real question I'm asking you guys. Nonetheless, I want to take a look at his efficiency, really see what plays into him just having such a good game. Ends this game 10-1. We're going to look at really just what allows him to snowball early on, and then his teamfight execution. See how he plays Puck. It's not the easiest of Puck games. I wouldn't say it's terrible. Their catch isn't the best for him. The best option they have is absolutely Rolling Thunder Blink, which I don't even know if he goes at this game. But even then, Rolling Thunder isn't that long of a stun, and it's hard to follow up on for them. Also, he goes for Linken's this game. So let's get into it. And now I want to tell you guys a little bit about Dota Plus from Overwolf. This is a free stats app you guys can download right now that's going to show you your stats for the last 3 months. So if you want to know your games played, your MMR, your win rate, your XPM, your GPM, all of these things you need to track to know how well you're doing and what you need to change to gain MMR, you can get for absolutely free. On top of that, the biggest reason why you need to download Dota Plus, at least for me, is the ban suggestions. Basically, it tells you what the enemy team is good at. It tells you their best heroes, what they've been winning with. You just ban it. You might be wondering why your good heroes, why your best heroes keep getting banned. It's because of Dota Plus. The enemy team is using it and banning out your best heroes. So go download Dota Plus right now, and I'll see you guys there. And starting off, we got his starting items. Goes for a very heavy stats build. Not what you'd expect. Don't really know why his branch is in his backpack, but he goes for a very heavy stat item build. I think really how he views this is that as Puck, you want to auto attack quite a bit. On top of that, this is a really cool play with the orb at level 1, so I want to show you guys this briefly. Anytime you're trying to play Puck, often what you want to do is you actually want to hit the range creep and then nuke the first melee creep with the first range creep. Well, yeah, of course it's the first range creep, but the first melee creep with the range creep. However, he sends it to the left here, and the reason why he does that is he didn't immediately want to put the range creep in deny range. Now, unfortunately for him, it gets denied anyway, probably because his branch is in his backpack, but either way, what you want to do on the first wave is actually nuke twice. The reason why you want to nuke twice and auto attack as much as humanly possible is because this is going to double the wave, right? So when you nuke twice, the first melee creep and then the second or third or fourth melee creep, what you're going to do is you're going to have this happen, and this is very favorable for you because essentially what you can do is you can bait the range creep, right? So as we'll see here, when this range creep gets even remotely low, he's going to pull creep aggro off of it by clicking on 9, right? This is going to cause 9 to get put in a bit of a weird spot where he has to tank some creeps, and this is really favorable for BZM. Now, I think BZM actually messes up a little bit here. I think he messes up is he actually misses the orb, sends it way too far to the left. If that hit 9, it would have put him in a very uncomfortable HP range. So much so that I think he actually could have started to look to really just giga trade with 9 here. On top of that, his next auto attack was from the low ground, and it misses. So all of a sudden, 9 doesn't get hit by an auto and doesn't get hit by an orb, which would have put 9 at about this HP range. Also, BZM could have eaten a tango here. He could have branch eaten a tango if he really wanted to double down on this double wave. And all of a sudden, you know, instead of being like a really, really favorable trade, they're almost even. So I don't know, that just felt like a small mistake to me, but all the concepts are still very, very advanced. And at this point, you can kind of slow down with the orbs. You only really want to orb when you have to, outside of the first wave, because, you know, you just want to make sure you save your mana and you only really use it when you have to. If you're just casually orbing for CS that are uncontested, that's definitely a mistake. On top of that, something that he does that's really cool as well is he orbs at 154. If you shoot your orb when you're in the mid lane, at least on your side of the river, at 154 towards the small camp, it will connect at 155 and therefore stack the camp. This is obviously really nice because when you're playing mid lane, especially something like Puck Pango, it's unlikely either player is going to like dominate the other. This is definitely not one of those matchups. You can be annoying to each other, but it's unlikely you're going to dominate. So what he decides to do here is really play for the small camp. And yeah, he just starts to kind of orb through the wave to the small camp. He does this multiple times here. Unfortunately misses some CS. Does this multiple times here. And this is also why he goes in early null. So there's 2 different items you can buy after... well, there's 3. There's 3 different items you can buy after bottle. The first one is a stick, which is pretty good against Pango. He spams spells. The second one I generally recommend is Null Talisman. The third one is Boots. And the reason why he goes for null here and it makes sense is because he's playing the farm game, right? He's just playing the shove in the wave, kill the small camp, rinse, repeat. On top of that, he actually goes for the the bounty rune at kind of a weird time here. He was out of bottle charges, and I think he was afraid of getting pressured out of the lane, so he does decide to leave the lane. However, this actually causes him to miss quite a few creeps. It doesn't really seem to bother him though. He seems to prioritize having good regen and good resources over necessarily the extra creeps, which is definitely different than what I'm used to, what I generally look to do. So I just thought that was cool. I don't know if I would have went for the rune there, and perhaps it would have caused me to be very, very low HP at this point in the game. So the next thing to note is he did actually go for an early game gank here. So his first gank of the game actually stems off of a trip back to base, and this is very common. So a very common situation you'll see with a lot of mid lane players actually is the boots into base, or at least the out of bottle charges into base. This one's very convenient because if you get your boots and then you go back to base, it just makes the trip much, much shorter, of course. And that's not particularly surprising. Just, you know, chops off some time off the way back to base. And then he's able to now TP bottom. The reason why TPing after you go for a base trip is good is because after the gank, you're actually going to have resources to continue farming and go back to the mid lane. So he goes for a gank here. Unfortunately, 33 kind of senses this, doesn't end up walking up, isn't able to actually get the gank. So instead, he tries to put a priority on getting the rune and heads back to mid. And this is generally what you want to do. If you gank with 0 bottle charges, half HP, half mana, you're ruining the game. It's that simple. It never works. Because if you do that, you're going to end the gank, and yeah, your game is just screwed. And the reason why is often what's going to happen is you're going to be completely out of resources. And often, if you gank a side lane with like half HP, half mana, and low bottle charges, which is a very common scenario for mid lane players, you're often just going to even die. The amount of times I see mid laners way overforce ganks and then actually end up dying because they didn't have the proper resources is insane. On top of that, your farm just gets completely annihilated. So this sequence is significantly better than the random ganks that the average player puts on. The only other time I would gank, usually from the mid lane, on a hero like Puck, that really requires a good start, is off a rune. Even here, he kind of ends up walking towards top, but decides against it, and just goes back to farming the mid lane. Now, why does Puck not really want to gank too much early game? Well, the reason why is the hero cannot jungle. So something that I've learned from playing the mid lane quite a bit now over the past week and a half is essentially that if you cannot jungle very easily, which fortunately gets a DD, which helps out a little bit here, but if you can't jungle that easily, you have to stay mid longer than other heroes. You have to go back to mid. Because for a hero like Storm Spirit, while he does want to sit mid anyway for like 80% of the game, it's 80%, where something like Puck wants to be mid like, let's say 95% of the lane or 90% of the lane. And let's say Storm is like 70%, right? Something like this. And the reason why is when Storm ganks top, he can farm this camp, this camp, this camp, where Puck cannot do this, right? Puck absolutely cannot do this. He doesn't want to auto attack a camp down with illusory orb. Like that's unbelievably slow, right? It's unbelievably inefficient. And so, yeah, you just don't do that. He just clears the small camp, goes back to the lane, kind of rinse repeats. And on top of that, he is fortunate enough to get a bottle refill. In your games, you're going to have to put a high priority on making sure you get the power runes, which often actually go uncontested, at least by supports. And so you should really be getting a lot of the runes in a lot of your games, as long as you remember to go for it every 2 minutes, or, 2 minutes from 4 minutes on. Next, we are going to see our first rotation of the game. He's got his Blitz Knuckles, level 9, pretty strong now. Right, I feel like level 9, level 10 is when Puck actually becomes much more of a menace. Having 2 high damage nukes is quite good. You know, when you're only like 6, 7, having only Illusory Orb as your damage source is pretty underwhelming. Something like Storm, once again, is much better at ganking when it comes to his level 6, 7, 8 spike, or timing, because he can jungle on his way there, jungle if nothing happens. If it goes awry, he can continue to jungle and a support can sat mid, and he does a lot more with just level 7. While Puck is still okay and Coil is useful and he did look for a gank this game, you definitely don't do nearly as much damage in relation, and so you have to be a little bit careful about that. But ends up getting the Coil, has to disengage on the Illusory Orb and Waning Rift cooldown timing, and that's exactly what he does, kind of chills here. Make sure he doesn't, overcommit and die. Once he realizes that the Pango and the Doom are both disengaging, he re-engages, and this is kind of how Puck goes. You usually want to use your Orb, use your Waning Rift, then kite out. If you kite in afterwards or you try to auto attack too much, that's how you feed. So once you get Witchblade, this is when your hero wants to really get active. If you're playing Puck, you should be aiming for an 11 to 12 minute Witchblade every single game. This should be your general goal. Now, that is a little bit early, so you can also go, you can be happy with a minute 13 Witchblade, but in general, you should be aiming towards that 11 11, 12 timing. If you can get it, then you want to go for a smoke. And you can see immediately, right as the coil is coming up, right as the Witchblade is actually being delivered, funny enough, he's actually going to go for a smoke, and it's immediately going to turn into a kill. And yeah, this is just how you should play your game. Once you get the Witchblade, call for a smoke. Just gank a lane. Wherever someone's team split up, gank it up. Your hero does so much damage once you hit the Witchblade. Your chase potential on Puck is unbelievable when you have this Witchblade timing, and that's why this item is so powerful. On top of that, something to note is he actually skips his talent at level 10. Doesn't end up going for that here, just goes for the extra point in Winning Rift. That's because your level 10 talents suck. From here on, he ends up being pretty passive, plays for the runes, kills the small camp as we've been talking about. He's done this, I think, like 7 times, 8 times this game. Something ridiculous. He's just killing the small camp, pretty much off cooldown. Back to mid and clearing. Now, at this point of the game, once again, you can get active. If the fight, like, let's say you've done what I've said, right? And you're level 10 at minute 12, which is quite higher. You're level 10 at minute 11, 30, right? You're a giga farm. If you manage to do this, right? If you do actually get these timings off, you should just fight. If the enemy team is going to fight you, which they will, the only thing you should avoid is like running into multiple heroes that are just immediately grouped up. You have to be very kite oriented as Puck. Generally what you want to do is kind of walk up and hit the first person you see. If you orb on the first person you see, like directly on top of them, that is how you die. And we'll get into this and I'll show you an example of that. So we're going to see that with this reload play in here. Just take a look at exactly what he does. So he gets reload in, and immediately as the fight breaks out, goes for the silence and orbs out. He goes for the Witchblade hit, didn't get it off, which was a bit of a mistake. I think he just gets it off at the end. Gets it off and kites out. And this is really nice. If you can orb to a location, right, if you are for some reason behind the enemy, if you can orb towards your team or away from the enemy, that's really nice because then you can re-engage on your spell's cooldown. And that's what you should do. When your orb is coming up in about 2 to 3 seconds, you can look to start to re-engage because you'll have a way out if you do end up getting targeted, right? It goes in, finishes off the Pango just barely. Has to be very careful with that Waning Rift. You see how when he went on the Troll there, he was very hesitant to commit to the kill because he understands that Troll is just a bit of a Puck counter to some extent. Troll can definitely kill you if he gets very lucky on the roots. And on top of that, he just had no orb, right? No orb, no Waning Rift, kites out, goes for 33 instead. Doesn't end up getting the kill, but hopefully that kind of makes sense. You do not want to overcommit with your positioning on your early orbs. That is a recipe for disaster. Next up, we're going to see the best case scenario for Puck. You clear multiple creep waves. You can see preps down the creeps, orbs towards the small camp if you want to be really efficient, right? Clears another creep wave. Unfortunately, they nerfed Puck where you don't one-shot waves anymore, so you have to be a little bit careful. He also will buy Kaya later on to actually deal with this issue, because that does let you one-shot creep waves. But either way, he's going to go across now. You can see he wants to cut across with his team. I'm not really sure why he feels so confident here. I guess he thinks that the enemy team is just looking to split push, which they were. They probably studied Tundra and know that they like to split at this point of the game. I didn't believe they had vision, but either way, this is the power of Puck. If you can bait rotations to side lanes and clear the waves, you're going to get a ton of gold off quickly clearing the waves, which your hero can do very safely. So if you aren't clearing side lanes constantly as Puck, you're probably making a mistake because your hero is unbelievably good at it and can really just open the map, open the net worth for your team. But yeah, they end up taking a very favorable fight. Gets a TP to top lane, right, or gets a rotation to the top lane, connects mid after he sees that. He was probably going to do it anyway, but expected the rotation to the top lane. They get that kill, and they're off to the races. He's now level 13, 16 minutes in, which is honestly quite unbelievable. And he's, yeah, just ready to start to snowball. On top of that, he's going to go for Linken's next, which seems a little bit weird, but I think he just feels like Doom's the only thing that kills him, to be honest. Yes, he can die to like a Rolling Thunder plus like Hoodwink Chain Stun. You know what I mean? That's definitely possible, but it's unlikely, you know. So would I recommend going Linken's every game? Absolutely not. I think there are some games where you actually even want to go BKB. If you're against something like Underlord and you go Linken's, your game's not going to be too fun. Yeah, it prevents you from getting A-Toast, but you're still going to get pitted, right? So you have to be very careful in those games. You might want to go BKB. On top of that, the other item you can go is Kaya Sanj. If they have something like, you know, a Bane. Something like Linken's against Bane is a little bit risky, or against Shaman is a little risky, because they have so many Linken's pops, or Rubik is probably the best example, because they have so many Linken's pops where it might not be enough. So you got to be a little bit careful depending on the game, and depending on the types of disables. If they have very low single target disable, it's actually often good to buy Linken's, because then you'll know the one specific or two specific spells you're buying it for, and you can play around that. Then the Linken's becomes a very powerful item, because it makes you very hard to catch, especially against certain heroes like the Doom. Alright, so moving on towards the mid to late game here, I just want to talk about the current items that he has and how that's going to dictate his gameplay. What you'll see from BZM at this point in the game when you have bots, Blink, Lincolns, and Kaya is that you're like basically the best split pushing hero in the game because you one-shot creep waves and you're almost impossible to gank. Like certain team comps literally cannot kill you unless you just grief. And so you have to take advantage of this. You're gonna see he's not just gonna back, right? He's gonna clear the wave and he's actually gonna look to push the next wave. Even though it's far up and he has practically no vision of the enemy, I mean he does now, but even though he had no vision of the enemy at the time, he was pushing up because he understands that unless they, even if they smoke gank him, if he's paying enough attention, he can get off his phase shift, get off the blink, and get out. And you need to clear waves because Puck is a hero that actually snowballs. Puck's a hero you want to get a lot of farm on. Puck's a hero you want to pop off on and like really be this giga carry. Yeah, it sounds a little bit weird because people see Puck as just like this initiator, but he's absolutely not just that. And now, because he's giga farmed, he's way more than that, right? He's got his level 20 talent. That's the Waning Rift cooldown. Incredibly good talent, right? Incredibly good talent because it just allows you to constantly silence the enemy. It's a 50% uptime on the silence. Beautiful initiation here. Silence onto the Pugna, coil onto the Pango, which kind of griefs his initiation in the team fight. He gets gone on here, but he's just too tanky, right? He's able to actually get off the Waning Rift, falls up into the phase shift. They follow the orb, is able to get the blink out. Almost decides to cut the creep wave, which would have been pretty funny. And now, what do you think he's going to do? Fight ends, right? That fight went pretty bad. They actually lost 1,000 net worth off of that. What is he going to do? He's going to clear the nearest side lane. Is going to play the tree line. He's very careful. He doesn't want to get picked off. Obviously, he's a little bit afraid of something like the Hoodwink Bushwhack from the trees or the potential Rolling Thunder, which was on cooldown, but still, you want to be a little bit careful. All right, and finally getting to our last team fight of the game where he really, honestly, BZM just puts on a show here. He's going to lead with the orb. Honestly, I think you should be careful about this. The only time you should do this is if you're specifically trying to reach the backline. So if the enemy has supports that specifically you can target, for instance, this Pugna, no proper defensive item. If you get on top of him, he's screwed. This Pugna, same thing, no proper defensive item, right? It's just one of those games where both the enemy supports are very susceptible to your coil and your silence, right? No dispels, no glimmers, no Yules, even no force staffs to at least try to get away from that coil. So he gets to the backline here, silences up the Hoodwink, gets a beautiful silence on the 3. Even the Pangolier actually has no dispel here and he has no way to get away from the silence or the coil. And so getting onto the backline in this game for BZM makes a ton of sense. But if you cannot really target their supports, you should play, you could still play to target their supports, but you have to be a lot more aware of the fact that certain games, if they have like a Lion Hex, you can't just jump the backline. In those games, you need to have patience, make sure you have vision before jumping. This game, he can be a bit more confident due to the matchups, due to the slow disables, and due to the lack of defensive items from Tundra. This jump makes a ton of sense here, does still kite out, right? And I want you to keep in mind, I'm gonna wind it back 10 seconds here. I want you to keep in mind when he does go in here, he throws his orb intentionally through multiple heroes, which is great damage, but also intentionally away from them. Then he goes for the phase shift and kites out. Yeah, the enemy is low, right? This Pango's half HP, but you absolutely do not commit on him when your spells are on cooldown. And what we're gonna see is he's gonna continue to just terrorize this backline, right? This Pugna ends up getting killed, drops the E-Blade, Witchblade tick finishes him off. Next up onto the Hoodwink, who he then kills as well. And honestly, what a team fight from BZM. It really doesn't get better than that. Coil onto the Troll, Pango, and I think the Pugna. Silence onto multiple to start the fight. Completely isolates the Doom, which allows the CK to rip through him. And honestly, just a 1v9 fight from BZM. There's nothing, you can't say anything else. It's just an incredible fight. And yeah, that's going to be all for today's video. They end up just kind of taking the rest of this game by storm. There's 16,000 net worth ahead. And yeah, I think a lot of it comes from him just really understanding his timings. He does a great job in the laning stage of just knowing that it's a farm lane, really maximizing that. Doesn't overforce the ganks. He did look for ganks, but he didn't force them, right? Even when he went bottom with that original TP, I love how he didn't hard commit on it. He realized it wasn't going to happen, accepts that, walks back mid, doesn't force anyone into some stupid ass dive, just resets the pace of the game. On top of that, I really like how he smoked with his Witchblade and abused that timing as he dies Fountain and gets his first death of the game. All right, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And peace.
And that's all, but remember, before you leave, before you tune out, subscribe to the gameleap website where we are going to help you get to the next rank. If you're stuck, click the link down below. and I'm out. Peace.